Welcome in Sideline Sports Show here on this lovely Thursday afternoon. Ben and Tim here with you. Tim, how are you doing, my friend?
Ben, I'm doing good, man. It's almost Friday. I can almost
Yeah.
feel it. It's just again. I feel like I say this every week, but I call it Friday Eve for a reason. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Tim, before we even get started, as you know, we're breaking down each and every single college conference in America, but I feel like we have to give a shout out to our sponsor first, Tim, before we actually invite our guest onto the show today, because it's Section 103. I mean, if you want all your good Georgia Tech athletic gear, you got to go to Section 103. Use your 10% off code Sideline at checkout, so go check them out as we introduce our great friend Roddy Jones, former Georgia Tech running back and ACC network analyst. Roddy, how are you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic, guys. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk some football. We're almost at media day, so it's starting to feel like it's right around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Roddy, you're going to help us kind of break down the ACC. So, let's start. I wouldn't say the easier side because I feel like the coastal side is always just whacked up every single year. There's not a consistent winner in the coastal. So let's start with the Atlantic. So we'll give your thoughts first, and then we'll kind of go Tim, and then we'll go back to me, and I'll be last. So who do you have? Let's start from the
Yeah,
top.
man.
Who do you think's winning it all?
So I think the Atlantic, first and foremost, is going to be one of, if not the most interesting divisions in all of college football. I think when you look at not only the fact that you've got Clemson, who won double-digit games. You got Wake Forest that won double-digit games. You got NC State that won 9 games and missed their opportunity for a 10th with their bowl game being canceled. But you look up and down that side of the conference, and everybody's got a quarterback back. I mean, Boston College has got Phil Dracovic. You got Syracuse with Garrett Schrader. You obviously with Clemson with DJ Uiagalelei, which we'll go into whether that's good or bad. But NC State, Devin Leary, Wake Forest, Sam Hartman, Florida State with Jordan Travis. You go up and down, and then Louisville with Malik Cunningham. You go up and down that side of the division or that side of the conference, and everybody's got their quarterback back. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens on this side. Now, if you're asking me who I think is going to win the Atlantic Division, I don't know how you can bet against Clemson with what they've got on defense. And I keep hearing over and over in the preseason, well, what about the offense? What about the offense? What about the offense? And my answer to that is that the offense by the end of the year was like a slightly below average offense. It wasn't great by any means, but it was like slightly below average with Will Shipley running the ball and Phil Maffa, who I think is fantastic. And that team with the defense that they're going to have this year, if they have a slightly below average offense, I think they're the best team in the league. So they're going to find some way to be able to move the football, whether it's running it, whether it's figuring out stuff with DJ Uiagalelei or Cade Klubnik. But defensively, the defensive line is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the country. Brian Brzee, who missed most of last year with the torn ACL, is back. Miles Murphy, you're seeing his projected first-round pick. They got Xavier Thomas back. And then you look on the interior, Tyler Davis is back as well, not to mention the depth that they have behind those guys because they've been able to sort of stack classes. At linebacker, they're going to be more athletic, maybe not quite as savvy, missing Balin Spector and James Skalski, but the guys that they have are going to make him a very athletic group with Trenton Simpson in particular playing that Sam. And then in the secondary, they've got some real talent. I think Nate Wiggins is going to be a star. We saw what Andrew Makuba could do last year. Landon Zanders missed a lot of last year. So I think this defense is going to be fantastic. It should be a top 5 defense in the country. I thought that last year, and they had injuries, and they were still a top 10 defense. So I think Clemson's going to be the one to come out of the Atlantic at the top.
All right, Tim, who do you got?
well, I'm a Clemson fan, so it kind of feels like you already know where I'm going to go on this. But in all seriousness, I love NC State. Devin O'Leary, as you mentioned, Roddy. Kid's elite as well. But you also got to think about it. In the year that Clemson was down big time. I think that they only had like three or four drives the entire regulation against NC State, where it wasn't a 3 and out. So again, we talk about the Clemson defense, which is going to be one of the best, if not the best, in the country as well. You got to give some respect to the Wolfpack defense as well. Now, whether that's going to be DJ Uiagalelei, his ability, is he going to actually step up this year? Is he going to be the guy we saw against Notre Dame and Boston College in the 2020 COVID year? Or is he going to be the guy that we saw all last year who had more starts than he had touchdown passes? So it's just not one of those things. You can't have another year where it goes 9-9, 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. It's one of those things. If he does that again, this offense is not going to be it's going to do anyway. Like it's got to be, it can't be in the hundreds like it was this past year. If they can improve that to about 50 or so, and they can have Will Shipley, as you mentioned, Kobe Pace, Phil Maffa, those guys running the ball, this offense can be very, very good and very, very scary, honestly. And we already know what that defense is capable of. Again, I'm really looking forward to Brian Bresee. You know, he's draft eligible this year. Miles Murphy, he could be in the draft this year. These are some top-notch guys on that defensive line. So I do like Clemson, but I think we also got to give some respect to the defense of NC State in that division. You mentioned the QB play from Louisville. I mean, with Malik Cunningham, Boston College for Phil Dracovic. I mean, this is stacked. Now, of course, it's weird that we're not mentioning Florida State, but, you know, hopefully they'll be getting back soon. But in the meantime, they're kind of even more at the middle of the pack right there. But for me, it just comes down to NC State and Clemson. Now, Wake Forest can kind of be a little bit of a sleeper like they were this past year after they went 11-3, 7-1 in the conference overall. I think that they could do some things with Sam Hartman at quarterback. It's just that defense of theirs got exposed last year. Even Clemson couldn't get above 30 points to save their life. They scored over 40 against the Demon Deacons last year. So that defense, unless they improve, I don't see them being a real contender this year in the Atlantic, unless Sam Hartman kind of has a very similar season to he did last year. So for me, early on, you just got to roll with Clemson. And you just kind of hope that DJ isn't exactly the QB he was last year. And if he is, you have a guy in Cade Klubnik waiting on deck.
Yeah, and so mine is also Clemson, but it's exactly like Roddy and Tim mentioned. That defense returns a lot of key starters on this defensive line and really just in the linebacker position too. I mean, it's going to be a very, very good defense, probably one of the best in the ACC this upcoming season. The only question I have, guys, is really the quarterback play. I think DJ will start for sure, but how long will it last? Because I think that's the biggest question mark of Clemson, because, I mean, every other position is almost kind of guaranteed for everybody else. This offensive line returns 4 starters. So, I mean, you may see one new offensive line starter for Clemson this year, but other than that, really it's just everybody's questioning whether it's DJU going to last the whole season or is Clay Klubnik going to come in and play halfway through the season if that first game against Georgia Tech in Atlanta doesn't go well, because you got to remember Georgia Tech played them close at Clemson last year. So even though it's a game one and Georgia Tech doesn't look like they're at the best yet, you got to look and say, hey, we played this team very, very close last year. So we got to look and see if that's going to be an issue in game one against Georgia Tech. But I don't see that. I see that DJU will probably have improvements. We've already seen a little bit of videos of him losing weight, getting healthier, getting a little bit stronger with the arm. So we'll see how that plays out. But right now, I got Clemson at my number 1. And at my number 2, I got NC State. Devin O'Leary is probably the guy that will probably lead the ACC quarterbacks out of all of them, just because of how well he did last year. 35 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That was the least amount of interceptions by any ACC quarterback last year. So, and this offensive line, even though they lost one of their key starters to the NFL draft, I still believe this is going to be a really good offense. Defensively, they averaged a low of 3.3 yards per rush last year against the run. So it'll be very, very interesting to see. And they only allowed 19.7 points a game. So, and they played very well against Clemson. And I really think this is the 2 teams that we'll see in the ACC Atlantic race, and it will basically come down on October the 1st. Whoever wins that game, I believe, will win the Atlantic Conference. Roddy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I like NC State a lot. I have them at, I think when it comes down to it, I'm going to have them finishing 3rd. I think Wake Forest is going to be the 2nd best team in the division. And I think when you look at Wake Forest offensively, there's no reason to think they're not going to be just as explosive as they were a year ago. And I understand the questions defensively. They were not a good defense last year, but they got a new defensive coordinator in Brad Lambert. I think it's going to complement what they do on offense a little bit more. They'll be a little bit better in terms of forcing turnovers. They weren't great at that a year ago, and they had a lot of fumble luck over the course of the season. So from an interception standpoint, I think they'll be better there. And while they were pretty good, I mean, they had 15, so I shouldn't characterize it as if they were brutal, but I think there's some room for improvement there, especially if they get after the quarterback a little bit more. But offensively, they're going to do what they do. I mean, this is one of the top offenses in the conference every single year. And I'll go ahead and go to NC State. I love NC State defensively. I've got some concerns about NC State offensively, because they're losing Ike Ekwonu, and I understand that they get guys back. They weren't a good running team last year. They were pretty average for most of the year. It was disappointing, actually, their inability to run the ball in spurts. And then you lose a first-round pick, a top 10 pick. Like, you're going to have to really – and your two running backs. You're going to have to really do a lot of convincing with me to say that running game's going to be better. So then are you going to have Devin Leary throw the ball more, where you lose Emeka Emezi? And I think Devin Leary's fantastic, but a lot of what he does is underneath. It's fairly conservative. Not saying that he can't do more. We just haven't seen it. So I like Wake Forest a little bit more than I do NC State, despite the fact that the NC State defense is really good. Much like Clemson offensively, I think if Wake Forest defense can get to like just below average, then this is going to be a really good team. And I think they'll get there. They got enough coming back where I think they'll get there. And offensive line wise, I prefer Wake Forest's group coming back than I do NC State's. They got 5 starters coming back. They lose Zach Tom, but they get back Javionte Nash, who was out for most of last year. He was a 7th-year senior. So I like what they've got coming back on offense.
All right, Tim, give us your 2 and your 3.
For me, it's almost like 2A and 2B as well. But, for right now, I like Devin Leary too much. I know you said they lost a top 10 pick on their offensive line in Ike Ekwonu to the Panthers. And I love this kid Leary. He looked good as a freshman. And I've been impressed with him ever since. And I just feel like that he's going to be carrying that team. And then the defensive line for NC State's not too bad either. Now, it's not going to be quite as good as Clemson's, because that's impossible nearly, but they're definitely still a very, very solid squad, and I think they're going to be good enough defensively as well to stay in games, especially compete with Clemson in Death Valley on October 1st, as you mentioned earlier, Ben. So for me, it's really close between them and Wake Forest, but for me, it's just I like Devin Leary, so I think I just catapult him just a little bit more than Wake Forest. So number 2, I have NC State. Number 3, I got Wake Forest.
All right. And then at my 3, I have Wake Forest as well. But, I mean, y'all have already covered all the bases. No need to really cover that. Let's start with Tim. These next 3, I think, are kind of shuffled up for everybody, because I feel like you can kind of put them wherever you want. But who do you have finishing 4th in this Atlantic, Tim?
I actually have the same team as that finished 4th last year as 4th again this year in Louisville. Malik Cunningham, again, electric quarterback. I mean, He's very a Lamar Jackson type quarterback. He's definitely not Lamar Jackson, but still he's very elusive. He's very quick on his feet. I mean, I remember seeing a run him against Duke. I know it's Duke, but still at the same time, it was so impressive how quick he was with his feet. And I think he's in developing as a passer. I think he takes strides forward this year in that department as well. And I think they'll be competitive in the games against the top 3, Wake Forest, Clemson, NC State. But I think they won't win those games. I think they'll kind of find themselves in the middle of the pack in the Atlantic.
Okay, Roddy, who do you got finishing 4th?
Yeah, I think that this next group, as you guys said, is kind of all shuffled up, and I've got really 2 teams that are really tough to separate for me when you look at the 4-5 spot. So I go back and forth, but I'm going to go with Louisville as well. For really 2 reasons. 1, they've got 5 starters back on the offensive line, and 2, they've got Malik Cunningham. I did that game against Duke last year. He was unbelievable. Now, he was not as good against Kentucky, but when you look at the amount of usage that guy has, and the fact that he only turned the ball over, I think 6 times last year, taking care of the football, started throwing it better deep towards the end of the year with Tyler Harrell, who I know is gone, but I think they will manufacture offense with the run game, with that offensive line, take some deep shots, and he's fantastic. So I just trust them on offense a little bit more than I do the rest of the teams. So I got Louisville there.
Okay, mine's actually going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go Florida State, and I think you've got to see improvement from Mike Norvell and his staff. Jordan Travis is now the QB1. We can actually say that because last year there was that quarterback battle between him and Mackenzie Milton. We obviously saw it towards the end of the year. You saw Jordan Travis improve in this offense, and I think it's going to take a step forward, especially with the transfer help that they've gotten at wide receiver and running back. I think the biggest problem is going to be defense because, you had Jermaine Johnson, who obviously was the key defender on that defense, and now he's gone to the NFL. So we're going to have to see how that defense does. But honestly, right now, if you looked at me and said Florida State, Louisville, I would take Florida State. So I'm going to go Florida State at my 4. Let's start with Roddy, number 5. Who's number 5 for you?
Yeah, 5 for me is Florida State. And again, I go back and forth between these two teams because I really like the way Florida State ended last year. And if Jordan Travis starts every game for him last year, I think it's not a big leap. They were 5-7, but I think they're a bowl team a year ago. So I like Florida State. I understand the concerns on defense, but that's a young defense that's been growing up under Adam Fuller. I really like the way they started to play towards the end of the year, particularly up front. Fabian Lovett, I think, is going to be a name that people really know by the end of the year as one of those interior linemen. But they've grown up at linebacker. They're talented on the back end as well. And I think those guys started to play together more. And then offensively, I love the way they ran the ball last year. And I think that will continue. Ja'Shawn Corbin's gone, but I really like Trayshawn Ward. And obviously you mentioned the help that they're getting from the transfer portal. I think one of the transfers of the year is going to be Trey Benson, the transfer from Oregon, the running back at Florida State. So I like Florida State in that spot. I would not be at all surprised. I honestly would not be surprised if Florida State ends up in the top 3 by the end of the year. I'm just not ready to go there because I haven't seen it yet.
Same. Tim.
I almost put Boston College here because I wanted to, shake things up a little bit, and because I like Phil Dracovic that much. And then I was just like, as mentioned, the transfers, I looked into them and I'm like, yeah, these are just solid transfers as well. With, you mentioned Jordan Travis, who can throw the ball, as we know, but also developed as a runner as well. We know he could definitely pop off here and there for occasionally like a 200-yard passing game and a 100-yard rushing game. So he's definitely got that in his arsenal. He's going to be the bona fide starter this year. And for that standpoint, I think they're going to be just behind Louisville because they go to Louisville. And I think that being said, if it was at home, I maybe give them the advantage and put them at the 4 spot. But because they go to the Cardinals, I don't think they come away victorious in that game. So I have them finishing just behind Louisville at number 5 as well.
Okay, number 6. Yeah, number 6 for me. I got Boston College. I like Phil Dracovic. Without him last year, I think they would have done a lot better. But since he was injured, they only scored 40 points on offense. I mean, that's not going to cut it for Boston College. It's not going to cut it, especially within a tough Atlantic division. But they're not going to have as much help as they did last year. They don't return any starters on the offensive line. I think that is a huge key to this whole entire thing. But they have 7 starters returning on defense, and I think that will be a very helpful thing for Boston College. But they got to improve on the run defense because it was absolutely not – it wasn't the worst, because I think Syracuse was probably the worst last year, but it was up there down towards the bottom. So I'm going to put Boston College at my 6. So let's go, Tim. Tim, who you got at your 6?
I have Boston College as well, and that for me would put Syracuse down at the bottom. Just not a lot there for Syracuse down at the bottom. Not really sure. Dino Babers, he's kind of playing for his job right now. But you look at Boston College, like I said, Phil Dracovic, I love his quarterback. He doesn't return any help on that offensive line. And again, last year he had a little bit of an injury problem. He was. I remember him missing I think 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer with an injury that he had. So I think that kind of affected him a little bit this year. I think he could definitely take that team to a little bit higher towards the middle of the pack as well, maybe even to an upset or 2. But again, he's going to definitely have to rely on that defense a lot because, again, the decent amount of Newcastle characters on that offense. So for me, I just have Boston College at 6, and then Syracuse down to the bottom just doesn't really excite me. So I have them at 7.
Okay, Roddy.
Look, I think it's, we're kind of splitting hairs here, but when we go and vote, if you had to ask me what team is going to be what team is going to finish the most spots higher than where it's voted this year, if you had to go out on a limb, take a bet, give me a flyer, I think it's Syracuse, and here's why. And they're who I have picked to finish 6th, but I think they could finish anywhere from 3rd to 7th. And here's why. You go back and you look at the defense of Syracuse last year. Total defense, it's the second best total defense in the conference a year ago. Yards per play, it's the fourth best defense in terms of yards per play. They were fantastic stopping the run last year. They were really solid stopping the pass. Their entire linebacking core was young, and they're back. They've got excellent guys on the back end. And that's just the defense. By the way, on offense, they might have the best player in the entire league in Sean Tucker.
Yeah.
So
right.
their ability to find something in the pass game, in my opinion, is what's going to determine where they finish. But I think their floor is 6, because if nothing else, you can turn around and hand it to Sean Tucker, and he's going to do what he did a year ago. They really figured out how to play Garrett Trader off of him against most teams and be able to move the ball. If they can find something passing wise, I think they'll do really well. But Tony White, their defensive coordinator, really the past couple seasons has been fantastic. He's been as good as there's been in the league. And that Syracuse defense is probably the most underrated unit in the entire league. So I'll go Syracuse 6, Boston College at 7. It's nothing against Boston College. I think Boston College could be a bowl team. I think you could have all 7 of these teams be bowl teams. But, I mean, you're talking about a team that is losing 5 offensive linemen that were incredibly experienced. Christian Mahogany going down was just really tough for him. There's no way that offense is going to be markedly better. I think it'll be slightly better. I don't think it'll be much better than it was a year ago, because even though you get Phil Dracovic back, you lose the entire offensive line. Pat Garrett, running back, is a decent running back, but do I think he's able to overcome that? I don't know. And we'll see how they evolve on offense. And then defensively, it's a back end that I actually really like. I think they've got some good players in the secondary. Up front, they've done a good job of playing above their skill level. You know, sort of the sum has been greater than the parts, or whatever, however that saying goes. But I do think the defensive line, or excuse me, I do think the defense is sort of punching above its weight, and the style that they played really helped them out on defense. They slowed things down, and they did a really good job of complementing what they were doing on offense, which sort of buoyed their defensive numbers. But I like Syracuse 6, BC at 7.
All right, and then at my bottom, I have Syracuse. The only reason I'm going to do this, I believe in Sean Tucker. I like that pick. Probably one of the best running backs in the ACC. Had a 1,496 yards just by himself last year. But Dino Babers has only won just 2 or fewer ACC games in his 5 of 6 seasons at Syracuse. Until I can see that progression, then I can't really move them higher or lower. Well, I mean, you can't go much lower than 7, but I'm just saying, like, I can't really move them higher than that until I see that mark. And there's another team that's like that in the Coastal that we'll mention too in just a moment, but I have Syracuse at my 7. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll go over the Coastal, and then we'll ask Roddy a few more questions. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back in Sideline Sports Show. Ben, Tim, and Roddy Jones here with us today, breaking down the ACC. Let's actually start from the bottom this time and go up, and then we'll mention at the end who we believe will win the conference championship in the ACC. So let's start from the bottom. I think this may be unanimous, but we'll see. Let's start with Tim. Tim, who do you have at the 7th spot for the Coastal?
You know, Ben, I thought about putting Georgia Tech here just to kind of, mess with y'all a little bit, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just say Duke. That not a whole lot exciting there. Just, Duke's got, a couple guys here and there that are kind of intriguing, but as a whole, I mean, 0-8 last year, 3-9 overall, new coach and everything. So it'll be interesting to see, how they compete this year, if they're able to compete at all, really and truly. But again, there's not really much more that they can, get worse unless you go 0-12, I guess. But 0-8 in the ACC last year, until you get a little bit higher, you crawl out of the cellar. You're gonna have to be at the bottom for me.
Yeah, Roddy, who you got at 7?
Yeah, it's Duke, and I think it's because there's too many places where they have to have significant improvement. Although it is a talented roster. I mean, you look up and down that roster at the individual players, and there's some guys that anybody in the conference would like to have. So I do think there's a pretty large variance of what Duke can do. But I think they will most likely end up at the bottom, mainly because you got questions at running back, you got questions at quarterback. Defensively, they were brutal the last 2 seasons, and even though there's talent there, they're going to have to really overhaul the personality of that defense. So I've got Duke down at the bottom.
Yeah, same. I got Duke down at the bottom as well. Look, I think Mike Elko will probably be a really good fit at head coach for Duke, but I don't see it this year. We may see those improvements start to happen this year, but I don't see them going any higher than 7th on this list in the Coastal just yet. And it may be another year before they start moving up within the Coastal, but right now I have Duke at my 7. I'll start us off at 6 because this may shock Tim a little bit because I put this team a lot higher. I think I had them 4th in the Coastal last year because I thought I would see improvements, especially with the running back. But now that running back's gone, I have Georgia Tech at my 6. Look, here's the thing. Jeff Collins, he's 9-25 over his 3 seasons at Georgia Tech. And here's the thing. You lost Jahmyr Gibbs. You lost a lot of wide receivers. There's only one wide receiver, and that's Malachi Carter, that caught more than 15 passes last year. That's the only wide receiver that caught more than 15 passes for this Georgia Tech offense. Only one offensive lineman returns. There's a lot of questions in the secondary because all of them have went to the NFL draft or graduated. There's just too many questions for Georgia Tech, and I don't know how it's going to be answered. Jeff Sims has got to be better consistently throwing the ball. So we'll just have to wait and see how Georgia Tech plays out, but I have them right now at my 6. Tim, who do you have at 6?
For me, I guess I have a little bit more faith in Georgia Tech than you do, Ben, which is surprising. But again, your fan, you probably know them best. But for me, at number 6, I have North Carolina. Again, very talented team that they've recruited well last couple of years, but again, there's really nothing to show for it. And then their quarterback Sam Howell, he's gone to the draft. He's in the NFL now. 3-5 last year with him as their quarterback, losing season at 6-7. They've got some really talented players. They've had really talented players come through there. I just don't think they're going to be able to put together. And I think that the guy that was keeping it all together was Sam Howell. Coach Mack. I have faith in him to a certain extent, but he's recruiting well. But again, just not seeing the results on the field. Until I see that, I can't really put him much higher than where I have him. So at number 6, I got North Carolina.
All right, Roddy.
Number 6, I've got Georgia Tech as well, and I think whenever you're trying to figure out who's going to finish lower when you're on this side of the division, I think you have to look at who they play on the other side. And when you get Clemson every single year, it's a tough draw. Clemson plays from this side, Georgia Tech and Miami, and I think Miami's going to be pretty good. So that ends up being one of the tiebreakers for me. But I think you mentioned it, Ben, like the overall, when you look at Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims is going to have to play incredible and consistently for them to be a bowl team. And a lot of how Georgia Tech's season is going to go, to me, is how they respond to September, how they do in September and how they respond to it. They open with Clemson, they play Western Carolina, then you get Ole Miss at home and go to UCF. That very well could be 1-3. And then you play Pitt. So how do you respond if you struggle early on? How do you respond if you're able to do it, or if you're able to not able to win more than one of those games? And I think that if that were to happen, if they're 1-4 after the first week of October, there's going to be a lot of talk around the program about what's going on with Jeff Collins and can those guys block that out. And Jeff Sims has just been so inconsistent that I can't buy into that. They lost the best player on the team, maybe the best player on that side of the conference, in Jahmyr Gibbs going to Alabama. They lost their best 2 pass rushers in Jared Ivey and Jordan Dominic. So I think there's, again, questions all over for Georgia Tech. So I've got them finishing 6th.
All right, 5th. Tim, let's start with you. Who do you have finishing 5th in the division?
I would have Georgia Tech, getting not much better than where you guys have them. Like you said, questions all over the place with this program. Best player going to Alabama. Mir Sims just not really been the answer for you at quarterback you've been looking for. You guys were looking for excitement coming out of Paul Johnson. You finally getting away from triple option, finally playing some normal football, like a normal style, or I guess I should say a more modern style. And it just really hasn't kind of come to fruition yet. There's been moments, sure, but overall it hadn't really come together in wins for Georgia Tech and the Yellow Jackets. So again, yeah, I see them in that bottom third of the ACC. Yeah, like you said, they have a very brutal stretch. The first 5 games are very, very tough. They play a brutal non-conference schedule. So coming out of that, not a whole lot of confidence as well going into conference play. So with that being said, I think Georgia Tech's struggling, and they could be on the verge of looking for a new coach at the end of the year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, my number 5, I have, let's see, hold on. Yeah, I got Virginia. Look, Tony Elliott's a really good coach. I think he'll be a really good head coach, and they have one of the best quarterbacks in this division with Brennan Armstrong. I think he is phenomenal at quarterback. He'll basically be the anchor of this whole entire team. But my question is they surrendered 34 1/3 points on defense in ACC play and 6.8 yards per play. And that's really the question mark that I have for this Virginia defense, is because really they can score all they want. We saw that last year in the UNC game. They can score all day long. Defensive wise, I just don't see a lot of help on the defensive side. They don't have a lot of people coming back on the defense as well. So in Virginia, they lost all 5 starters up front. So at the offensive line. So that's going to be a question mark on offense. So I don't really see them succeeding that well on the offensive side either, except Brennan Armstrong will probably be the anchor of this whole team. So I got Virginia at my number 5. So Roddy, who's number 5 for you?
Yeah, this is sort of the line of demarcation for me. I think their other 5 teams that we're going to talk about are all bowl teams. Potentially, I could see all 5 of them making it to a bowl. But 5, I've got Virginia as well, and I think the biggest reason is the offensive line. I mean, Tony Elliott's having to completely rebuild this offensive line. He had to go get transfer from Georgetown that he's going to count on to start for him. Transfer from Dartmouth that he's going to count on to start for him. And we've seen plenty of guys, and we get excited about transfers all the time. And I think we get too excited about transfers sometimes. But when you're getting an offensive lineman from Georgetown, and Dartmouth, no offense to those guys, they could be fantastic players, but there's a reason that they ended up where they ended up. And the ACC is typically pretty good defensive line league. And so you're going to have to be more than just sufficient up front to be a really good team. So I think it puts a lot of pressure on Brennan Armstrong, despite the fact that they may have the best collection of 4 receivers in the league with Lavelle Davis, Dontavian Wicks, Billy Kemp, and then any combination of Keaton Thompson or maybe Malachi Fields or like that. When they go 10 personnel, 1 back, no tight ends, 4 wide receivers, they're as good as anybody. But what do they have other than throwing the football around? So I've got Virginia there.
All right, let's start. Tim, what's your 4?
I got Virginia as well. I love the kid, the Southpaw, Brendan Armstrong. I think he had a good arm. Coach Elliott, he comes from over here in Clemson area town. But I root for him. I'm going to hope he has great success. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not so sure about him as a head coach, just because there are things that I saw at Clemson. Like when he was co-offensive coordinator, then later became offensive coordinator full time this past year, solely. There were just issues that I had, and I was like, I'm not so sure about the hire. I'm not so sure about him. Maybe it was just a personnel issue. I'm not really sure what the issues kind of were when he was offensive coordinator the last couple of years for Clemson. But with that said, I think he has capability. He's got a good quarterback. We mentioned with Armstrong. Now I think they're more so kind of a middle of the pack team right now in that Coastal Division. So overall, do have some question marks on the side. I could see them pulling off a couple upsets, but I could also see them finishing down very low in the division. So kind of like for me, that kind of bounces out. So that's why I put them right there where I have them at about 4. So
all right, Roddy, who's your 4?
My number 4 is Virginia Tech. And the only reason that they're 4 is because I have so many questions about them offensively. I just got no idea what to expect from them offensively, to be honest with you. And I saw Grant Wells last year when he was at Marshall, and I think he's got potential. I think he's got talent. But like again, I just with the change in coach, with new offensive coordinator coming from the NFL, what are we gonna see from them offensively? I really like them on defense. I think that the talent on the defensive side of the ball gets them to 4 for me. But I think Virginia Tech could end up surprising people because there's a when you look at the talent from a recruiting standpoint, it doesn't necessarily stand up. But I thought they were better than what they showed a year ago. So I think this is a team with good quarterback play that can end up being pretty good. But I've got them at 4 for now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have them at my 4. And it's like you said, the defense is going to be the highlight for Virginia Tech next year. They'll be very, very good on defense. Offensively, they have 2 transfer quarterbacks coming in to try to basically win the quarterback position. Grant Wells from Marshall and Jason Brown from South Carolina will be battling it out under center. But I do like the running back room that they have with Malachi Thomas and Jalen Holston. And I think that will be a very, very good group. And shout out to Malachi anyway, because I know him personally. He's from Hart County. So really great kid, and I think he'll take over the running back 1 position. But it's just like you said, I think the running back room will be good, but offensive line's a question, wide receiving core's a question, quarterback's really a question. So really the only thing that has momentum on their offensive side is that running back room. So it'll be very, very interesting to see. So I'll go ahead and do my number 3 as well. I got North Carolina. Like I really think they're going to do a lot better than what Tim has predicted. This defense underperformed last year. Sure, they struggled. They had 32. They gave up 32 points a game average and only averaged 6.1 yards per play on defense. And I think that's going to change now with the new defensive coordinator that they're going to bring in. And I think offensively, you still have Josh Downs. I mean, that's honestly the top wide receiver in this whole entire conference. And I think if Josh Downs does what he did in the spring game for UNC, it's going to be a big year offensively for him. And so I have them a little bit higher than what Tim has them. So, Roddy, who's your 3?
Yeah, I've got UNC as well. And defensively, as you mentioned, I saw UNC enough to know that they just didn't fit. Like it was a team that their experienced guys that understood what Jay Bateman was trying to do weren't talented enough to just go out there and play simple, or excuse me, weren't talented enough to go out there and play simple, which is kind of what they had to do at times because the young guys weren't experienced enough to understand what Jay Bateman was trying to do. So you ended up getting blown coverages on the back end when they tried to be complicated. Then they would just get mauled when they were trying to be simple. So, but when you look at the pieces, especially when you get a guy in like Noah Taylor, which I thought the way he was used at Virginia, I didn't really get last year. So I think you stick him on the edge and he can be maybe not a game changer, but a really solid player for you. I just like too many pieces about North Carolina to completely write them off. Yes, there's questions at quarterback, but you mentioned Josh Downs. Phil Longo is one of the best offensive coordinators in the conference. And I think with an offseason, he'll figure out how to get production out of that offense without getting production from the outside receiving position, which they had none of it last year. And they don't have anybody this year that screams, "Hey, look, I'm gonna be De'Ami Brown." But they've got Bryson Nesbitt at tight end. You've got Kamari Morales at tight end, guys that I think you can move around and be pieces. And then you couple that with Josh Downs. And I'm not incredibly worried about them offensively. Phil Longo has moved the ball wherever he's been. So I think they'll be better defensively. I think they'll be better offensively just based on the offseason. And then there's the sense of entitlement that they came into last year with is gone. So I like UNC at the 3rd spot.
Yeah. All right, Tim, who's your 3?
Guess got to put Virginia Tech here because for me, it's the top 2 teams are kind of just above everybody else. Got to go Virginia Tech here. New coach, y'all mentioned, so a little bit of question mark, but I think that there is talent enough to where they can finish in the top half of the ACC Coastal, but more so kind of a guess just because we really don't know what we're going to see from these guys. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do, how they perform this year under first-year head coach. So,
all right. We all have the same top 2 teams. We may have them in different spots, but let's start with you, Roddy. Go ahead and give us our Coastal champion and then who you got finishing second.
So at the top of the coastal, I've got Pitt, and then I've got Miami second. And I went with Pitt over Miami because I trust Pitt's defense more than I trust anything else,
Ooh.
any unit in that group. I know what Pitt's going to be on defense, not only because they have good players coming back, especially up front. I thought their defensive line was a little underrated because you didn't have the names of the year before. But Servassier Dennis is a great player at the linebacker position. Those two safeties are back. I think they'll be better at corner than they were a year ago because you get some guys back from injury. So I like Pitt's defense. I understand the concerns about Pitt on offense, but that most of that offensive line is back. And let's not forget, Keaton Slovis was the freshman of the year in the Pac-12 in 2019. And then in 2020, he was first team all Pac-12 quarterback. Now, they only played, I think, 4 games, but still, like, he played well for those games. And then as everything crumbled around him at USC, he crumbled as well. You can't really blame a kid when his coach gets fired after 2 or 3 games. So I think Virginia Tech, I think Pitt is going to be really solid on both sides of the football, and I think they should be the favorite. I really like Miami. Tyler Van Dyke, if you ask me who's going to be the best quarterback at the end of the season, if we were to talk again, it's going to be Tyler Van Dyke, in my opinion. He is fantastic. I mean, arm strength, moxie, his ability, his confidence. I really like everything that he brings to the table. I like their offensive skill talent. It's unproven, but I like their talent. And I think their running back room is going to be as good as there is in the conference. So I like Miami 2, Pitt number 1. In the Coastal Division.
All right, Tim.
I'm actually going to flip flop. I have Pitt number 2 and Miami number 1, and I say that because a lot of the things you can analytics and stuff like that. And Miami was really good last year. You know, especially once Tyler Van Dyke took over. They ranked 10th in the country in passing yards, 321 a game. 68th in the country, 34 points per game. His team is overall, they're very talented, and they got a new head coach that he's very talented as a head coach in himself. So got a new AD. They're investing in that program and trying to build up some excitement. And again, the biggest thing that I have been that is that these two teams, Miami and Pitt, actually played it in the year, and it's actually going to be down in Miami as well. So now the only trick for Miami is it's going to be the week right after they play Clemson on the road. So it'll be interesting for that standpoint, and I think that the winner of the Coastal will come down to the very last weekend of the regular season, and I just think because it's at home, I think I got to give the slight edge to Miami.
I'm actually going to agree with Roddy. I actually have Miami at my 2 and Pitt at my 1, and here's why. Pitt, and it's just like Roddy said, I believe in Pitt's defense more than I believe in Miami's defense. I think both offenses will be very, very good. So I think they're pretty much even. So if you look at the other side of the ball, who do you think has the advantage? I want to say Pitt because, I mean, you look, they only held opponents to 5.1 yards per rush, which was honestly leading the ACC in rush defense. And then they limited defense to only 23.6 points per game. So looking at that, I mean, that's a really good defense, and that returned 7 starters. And I think that's ultimately the decision that I had to make when I was looking at both of these teams, because I think you can flip-flop either one. But I really believe that this Pitt defense is going to be a lot better than this Miami defense, because don't get me wrong, Tyler Van Dyke, great quarterback, great offense, and Kyle Slindovis will be a really, really good quarterback for Pitt. But I just believe that Pitt's defense will be the ultimate factor when this game comes down on November the 26th in Miami. So give me Pitt over Miami, as that will round out my top 2. All right, so Roddy and Tim, we're going to go. We have different championship games. Obviously, Tim has a different one than me and Roddy, but Roddy, me and you have Pitt and Clemson. Who do you have winning it all?
Yeah, I think it's back to status quo in the ACC, and I think Clemson wins it. These two teams obviously played a year ago. Clemson was banged up on defense, like I mentioned before, and they still had opportunities to win that football game without a stupid penalty. In the fourth quarter, Clemson gets the ball back. And do I have faith that Clemson goes down and scores? No, I don't. But they would have had an opportunity. And then early in that game, like if you go back and watch it, there's a couple of shots that they have where you have a dropped pass down the seam on a play that certainly could have put Pitt behind, because Pitt struggled on offense to start that game. There's a little dump pass to Will Shipley. Both of those balls dropped. Like, those weren't on DJ Uiagalelei. They were dropped by Clemson players that probably would have been 2 touchdowns. And so if Pitt's down, I think it would have been 3 scores at the time. How does that change the game with that excellent Clemson defense? And so when you look at how it played out a year ago, and look at the two teams as they're going to be constructed, I think Clemson's the better of the two, and I think Clemson wins the ACC.
Okay, Tim.
For me, yeah, I got Clemson and Miami. I just think overall, got a rematch essentially. But I just think Clemson's too talented, man. I think as long as DJ kind of just has a little bit better. I was going to say a little bit better. Has a much better year. They continue that two-headed running attack that they have with Kobe Pace, Will Shipley. I think that no matter even if the wide receiving core, because people forget, yes, DJ Uiagalelei struggled, but that Clemson receiving core, I mean, I think by the time that they got like the senior day or something, that they were starting, one of Dabo Swinney's son, Will Swinney, a wide receiver. I mean, they were so depleted at that position. A lot of guys just couldn't stay healthy. They're going to need like guys like Joseph Ngata to stay healthy. Bo Collins, he was kind of a guy that burst on the scene last year, had that monster game against Wake Forest. He's one of those guys. He's going to have to kind of continue building that relationship with DJ. Again, continuing to run the rock and play good defense as well. So I think you're going to see a much improved Clemson team. And I think that was kind of figured it out what to do like when this team struggles like that. Because I don't think it's been a while since he had a time. Right. Well, it's been since Kelly Bryant was the quarterback that he hadn't had a quarterback that he could really use in the passing game. So he had to just run the ball a ton. But he figured out a way to kind of reinvent it. So that way, if this team does struggle or have a time where they can't really can't really throw the football very effectively, they can at least run it using their two-headed monster. So I like Clemson to get back on top and win the ACC.
Yeah, I think it will be very, very interesting because Pitt's defense is going to be very good, but Clemson's will probably be better in this ACC matchup. But I'm looking overall, and I think Clemson will win this one as well. I just think these defenses, you can even it out. Both defenses will be very good in this game. I think this will probably be one of the best defensive battles in the ACC Championship that we've seen in a while. I mean, it's been a long time since you haven't seen a high-scoring game within this ACC Championship. And I really think that Clemson's offense by then will have a spark, and they'll know who their quarterback one is by then. And by that time, I think that offense will be rolling. I think they'll be healthy by then. I think even if DJU goes down, Clay Klubnik is an incredible quarterback, and I think he could be a QB1. So either way, I still got Clemson winning it all for this ACC title this year. So are we all guaranteeing that Clemson is in one of the Final Four spots, yes or no?
No, I'm not ready to guarantee that.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No.
Tim?
Number one, like I think you have to look at, like, none of that happens in a vacuum. So not only does it come down to number of losses that Clemson has, but also the number of losses the other teams have. But no, I'm not ready to guarantee. I could see Clemson as a 2-loss team going into the championship game and winning it. But yeah.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, Ben, I want to ask you: did you see? You watched with your eyes what we saw from DJ last year?
Yeah.
Because I wish I could unsee. Okay, it was awful. I just want to watch that memory from my brain. And so no, with that alone, you cannot put them into the top 4. No, because like you said, you could, as Roddy said, you definitely see them as a 2-loss going into that weekend. So I say no, you can't guarantee it quite yet.
I mean, I'm seeing other people saying, hey, they're guaranteed a 4 spot. I mean, it's them, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. So, I mean, you never know. So
maybe if Kate Klubnik comes on and just absolutely tears it up, but other than that, no.
Yeah. All right, Roddy, real quick, I got 2 questions for you. One, what can we expect out of the ACC network this year with you and the rest of the ACC network? What's something upcoming? I know Packer and Durham just kind of ended its long run, but what's up for you now in the ACC network this upcoming season?
Yeah, so as far as I know, going forward, we'll be at ACC Media Days. I think the Huddle guys will have most of that for you, and then the campus tours that we did last year, those will be going on as well. Other than that, man, your guess is as good as mine. I am on a need-to-know basis, and 99.9% of the time, I don't need to know.
There you go. And then one final question, because I've actually been wanting to ask somebody from this 2008 team this since I was like in 4th grade, right? So because Tim knows I'm a Tech fan. So, I mean, I've grown up and lived through the growing pains. But here's the thing. Did Jeff Collins recruit you out of high school?
Yeah, so Jeff was the director of player personnel. So he was not my lead recruiter. Brian Jean-Marie was. Nor was he any of those guys' lead recruiter, but he was the guy that orchestrated our visits
Yeah.
when we came. And so we all knew Coach Collins. So yeah, like he was a part of the recruiting process. He was one of the guys that definitely recruited us. He was really the guy that we all knew, because we all had our different recruiters, but we all knew Coach Collins.
Okay.
And he did a great job of really helping to stay connected. Like, he was the guy behind a lot of the stuff that we were sent. He was the guy behind a lot of the ideas that the coaches executed. So yeah, like, he wasn't my lead recruiter, but yes, he did recruit me.
Did he bring you Waffle House to convince you to come to Georgia Tech?
No. Well, look, I'm from Stone Mountain. Like, I didn't need that to convince me. Like, so no, the Waffle House thing didn't come until he got back, and that was and then it took off from there.
That'd be enough for me, Waffle House.
And then finally, one of my favorite moments of you, it was November 29th of 2008. It's pouring down rain in Athens, Georgia, and y'all got the win over Georgia. And that was honestly like you're leading in every stat that you almost had. Like, it was your leading. It was tied for most touchdowns in a game for you. It was first in carries. You had 13 carries. First in yards, you had 214 yards. What was that game like for you? Because I know from a standpoint, you guys were down 28-12 at the half. So what was that standpoint? What did Paul Johnson really say to you guys to light a fire under y'all to come out and win that game in 2008?
So the game was surreal, man. Like, I mean, it's my first time ever playing Georgia. I thought we were going to do this every year. We didn't do it again the rest of my career, but, the reason that it ended up being, the most carries I ever had, the most yards I ever had, the most carries, is because all the other guys that were going to take carries were hurt. They were banged up. You go back and you watch that game, and it's me and Luke Cox at the slot back positions for us, because Embry Peoples and Marcus Wright were hurt. So if you got a choice to pitch to me or to Luke Cox, you're going to pitch to me. No offense to Luke, but he was a great blocker, but I have had a little bit more speed than him. He's probably the only one I had more speed than. And then the way they played just lent us to getting a bunch of yards on the perimeter. So in terms of halftime, Coach Johnson, we just made adjustments like we always did. And he kind of said, if you think we're going to lose, don't come out, something like that. But it wasn't some galvanizing speech. We were too young to really get what was going on. We were too young to understand that we weren't supposed to win those games. Nesbitt was a sophomore. Dwyer was a sophomore. I was a redshirt freshman. It was Bebe's second time playing them. Like, the offensive line was a little more experienced, but most of our first times playing Georgia. So we didn't know we were supposed to lose the game.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting because, I mean, that was the first time I think Georgia Tech had beaten Georgia since, I think,
7 years.
7 years. And so there was a long stretch right there. And so, unfortunately, Georgia Tech is still in that stretch today. So,
and
go
I
ahead,
got
Tim.
Real quick. Roddy, you were in – I see you in the box score of that ACC Championship game in 2009. I'm a Clemson fan, man. You had the 4 carries for, 60-something yards, 64 maybe. I have to look again. But, you guys ripped my heart out that day. Like I was like 12 years old, man.
Just go back and watch CJ Spiller's runs only, and that'll put your heart back in, because he
was
great.
True.
He was great.
That's true. That's true. All right, so Roddy, thank you for joining us. Look, you got to talk to Mark Richt, because later on we're going to do the SEC, and I think Coach Richt would be a very, very good guy to have on the show for us, because we're all. I'm from Georgia. I'm in Georgia. Mark Richt, big Georgia guy. Do you ever bring up to him like, hey, you remember that day in 2008? Do you ever do that to Coach Richt when you're in the booth with him or sit beside him?
No. Coach Richt, he's aware of it, man, and he's one of the best people you'll ever meet. One of the best.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Roddy, thank you for joining us, man, and that is the end of our Sideline Sports Show. Thanks for joining. Come back next week as we will break down the Big 12, as we will break down that conference and, the realignment that's happening Texas, Oklahoma. This is their last couple years in the conference, so we'll talk about that more next week on Sideline Sports Show. Have a great week, and we will see you all next week.